The first step towards getting somewhere is to decide that you're not going to stay where you are. I've just borrowed the words of J.P. Morgan. Recently, I came across a quotation that resonated with me, and it went like this. There is no such thing as going back to square one. Even if you feel like you're having to start over, you are trying again with more knowledge, strength, and power than you've had before. Your journey was never over. It was just waiting for you to find it again. Good evening, extraordinary people. I believe that women are indeed incredibly strong and resilient human beings, and it is a pleasure and privilege for me to be in your presence. I also would like to welcome you to the inaugural Women's Conference dubbed From Pressure to Power. The last time I checked, none of us was born with an instruction booklet attached to our toe, explaining how to get through this thing called life. Life is unpredictable, and it is very hard to prepare for the unknown. We never know when life is going to throw us a punch or how hard it's going to be. But history has proven to us time and time again just how people are able to overcome what seems like insurmountable odds and shine brightly for themselves and those around them. This evening, I was tasked with the role of speaking to you on how to move forward after trauma. One thing is sure, when we are faced with trauma or adversity, we have a choice. You can either get knocked down and stay down, or you get knocked down and you fight your way back up. The choice is typically, it takes place in what has appropriately called rock bottom. I believe that everyone here has heard about rock bottom. Some of you may have visited that place more than once. I hope that there's no one here who is residing at rock bottom. I believe that there's some who have chosen to spring from the bottom so that they can rise to the top. According to Holmes and Rahi's stress scale, the top 10 most stressful life events commonly associated with feelings of hitting rock bottom are the death of a spouse or a child, divorce, marital separation, imprisonment, death of a close family member, personal injury or medical condition, marriage, dismissal from work, marital reconciliation, or retirement. It only takes one of these to knock you off your feet, and as a result, rock bottom is going to look differently to different people. I have had some rock bottom experiences, and each time I wished that there was someone I knew who would have experienced something similar and emerged stronger than they went into it. I looked for people that I can identify with, and I found no one. I believe one of the reasons why, and please forgive me for saying this, the churches are half empty is because we church people are so good at pretending that our lives are perfect and so well put together. So when ordinary people experience their rock bottom experiences, they leave the church because there's no one there to identify with them. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation with slides that would tell you what the experts say about how to move forward after your trauma. But I came here this evening prepared to share one of my personal experiences with you and how I managed to get back on my feet. I cannot tell you that what worked for me will work for you, but I believe that the general concepts in moving from trauma to triumph are the same. They say that life happens when we are busy making plans, and I can attest to that. Can you? There will undoubtedly be events thrust upon us with little or no advance notice, leaving us unguarded and vulnerable. These experiences will test us to the core. My biggest blow and potential setback was without question losing my marriage. As you heard earlier, I'm the author of 2 books, and one of them is Fiery Proof Woman. And in that book, I chronicle some of my most difficult experiences and how I was able to overcome them. I wanted to present myself as someone that somebody can identify with, because whilst I was going through my thing, there was no one for me to identify with. Here is my story in summary. I have always dreamt of my happily ever after. I consider myself a hopeful romantic with a big heart and someone with plenty love to give. As a child, I enjoyed reading fairy tales. So I believe in them and I wanted mine. However, growing up in a dysfunctional home didn't do anything to help me. And by my early 20s, I was already emotionally scarred. In retrospect, I believe that I was a broken young woman who was looking for someone to find all the pieces of my life that were shattered as a result of how I was socialized, put them back together, and keep them together. That's a big responsibility. I had no semblance of love. All I knew is that I wanted to find love. I wanted to feel loved, and I wanted love to be kind to me. So, in 1 year, I found, courted, and married a man. My beloved sister, who was younger than me, was going to get married the following year. And I was told, Karen, you would pick until you pick. If Jay get married before you, you would never get married. And so I was on a roll. I found him, I told him all of my fears, and he promised to be in my knight in shining armor. However, within a few months of the wedding, the initial impression of this God-fearing, reverent man who caught my attention in church, it was his adoration to God. When the audience was sitting, he would be the one who would stand and his hands in the air. That caught my attention. Eventually, after a few months, it was clear that my marriage, cooked up with all the wrong ingredients, was going to be a spoil. And I took it hard. The man who had promised to be my rescuer revoked on his promises. I tried my endeavor to fix whatever was going wrong. After all, I grew up in church, and I would have attended several dating and relationship seminars. One thing I took away was, men are not mind readers, you have to talk to them. You have to let them know what's on your mind. However, every time I poured out my heart to him, I would hear, so what you want me to do about that? Or, what you want me to say about that? I dealt with disrespect at all levels. I'm talking about sitting through conversations as he planned to hook up. I'm talking about him coming home at 5 a.m. with me, with my infant daughter, and all the foreign fragrance would just come in with him. I mean, people living in my home as I'm away at work. I remember that there was one particular relationship that happened with somebody at church for in excess of 3 years, and that person took every opportunity whilst I was at church conducting Bible study to share their pillow conversations. That person was the first one to call on birthdays, Christmas, New Year's, and any special occasion. Call the home, wake up the house. But faithfully I worked and I invested in our home. And whilst the married union reduced to a business partnership where we only talked about the house and the child, he kept his distance. And I remember there was one particular year we lived under the same roof, but my husband didn't touch me at all for that year. I remember suggesting professional counseling, and he was like, "You go, nothing wrong with me." There was evidence of his infidelity all around. I realized that I needed heavenly intervention when all of the people in our families that I thought he looked up to and respected couldn't reach him. I prayed that God would heal our marriage, but the more I prayed, the more things went haywire. Every time I discovered one of his sexual escapades, I sank deeper into depression and despair. They came like blows to my self-esteem. And before I can get up good from one event, there was something else to knock me off my feet. Eventually, I hit rock bottom, where I mingled with depression and self-pity. I stopped living and I started existing in self-pity. Yes, I became an expert at pretending that everything was okay. I would powder my face, put on my lipstick, and go out into the public. Couldn't wait to come home to drop my bag and to just bawl my eyes out. For years I prayed that God would change him, turn things around. I grew up without a dad, and the last thing I wanted was for my daughter to also grow up without her father. I didn't want to be a statistic of a broken marriage. I married for life, and I didn't want to be alone. I remember one day I came home from work and my daughter was an infant. I took up shift from the nanny, she left, and as I sat in our living room in the Grenadines where I worked, and the tears rolled down my cheeks, and my daughter, she muttered, "Mommy cry, Mommy cry." And she took her tiny hand and she brushed the tears from my face. And when that happened, a light bulb went off in my head. It was that time I realized that I could not continue in this life of depression and sadness and pity. I did not want my daughter to grow up remembering her mother always being sad and crying. My mental state of mind was affecting my ability to be a cheerful, loving mother. And I thought that I needed to get out of that environment for myself, but especially for my daughter. And so my greatest fear came upon me. When, despite my tears and prayers, it became obvious that to maintain my sanity, to find my purpose, to validate my worth, to be the best mother I can be, to realize my dreams and find my happiness, I had to let go of the one thing I desired to hold on to the most. And yes, I still consider losing my marriage as my greatest failure. But I decided, since I was going to lose my marriage, I couldn't be a victim of a broken marriage, but a victor. I was determined to be stronger, more influential, and more charismatic as a single woman than I was as a wife. At first I was afraid, I was emotionally parched. But I concluded that to remain in the marriage would have resulted in my psychological demise. And so I began to explore my options. The thing about it is, my husband, over the years, never admitted his infidelities. He always told me that it was in my mind, all in my mind. And as a matter of fact, there came a time when I started questioning if I was mentally disturbed. But I thought that if I was going to leave the marriage, I needed proof. I remember one Sunday evening, again in the Grenadines, I received a text message that went something like this: "You were right all along. I've been cheating and lying to you all those years. My life is a mess and I need some time to sort things out." By the time I received that text, I had already stopped crying, because I had already resolved in my mind that it was over. I was just waiting for proof. So I felt as if I had just won the lottery. It was the proof I needed, and it validated that I was not crazy. It was time for me to start fighting my way back on my feet. I knew that it was time to put years of abuse and heartache behind me. And the following day, I set the wheels in motion to terminate the marriage. I had worked really hard on our home, and I was not prepared for any judge to decide how it was going to be divided. My hands scraped the walls and painted them, and my back bent and hurt while I laid ceramic tiles. Meanwhile, I worked hard bringing in the dough. So I came up with a plan. I needed to get into a supervisory or managerial position so that I was in a position to refinance the mortgage. I remember having a conversation with my boss. There was a function of an area within the company that I was very instrumental in working with programmers in Canada and so on to develop this software to capture all of this thing. And the one thing that I did it very well, but I knew the whole function. And I wanted all of those areas to be consolidated under me, and I become the manager. So I had a conversation with my boss, and he told me how to go about it. And with that information, I went and I wrote a proposal to the company, and they accepted it, and I landed my first managerial position with an increase. With that, I then said I'm going to approach my soon-to-be ex. I gauge his mood, one day when I was in St. Vincent, and I offered him a sum of money for his share of the property, because he is not one of those. He was not one of those to say, my share is for the child. He wasn't leaving without his share. So he agreed to the proposal, and I went and legalized that agreement. Yes. Refinanced my mortgage, and within months I was the sole homeowner of that house. I have subsequently sold and rebuilt because I didn't want to live in that space. But gradually I began picking up the pieces of my life and examining them. Some of them I threw away. Others I dusted off, I rearranged, and the missing spaces, I filled them with new traits. Dependency and mediocrity, I throw away. I took counsel and caution and hope and optimism and faith. I embraced myself with those. And with an upright posture, a direct gaze, a confident smile, and an I know what I'm about stride, I set out. My experiences and my successes as a professional and personal as a lady have been endless. I am comfortable in myself and confident as a woman. I am so much stronger than I ever thought I could be, and I love me. I love me. I look myself in the mirror and I would say, if I was a gentleman, I'll be attracted to him. I must tell you, however, that my relationship with God was not without its challenges, because initially I was really angry and disappointed with God that he didn't give me the outcome that I really wanted. I wanted him to fix things. I wanted to stay married. And during those years of pressure, when I prayed, I quoted scripture, ask and it will be given unto you, and if you ask in faith, you would receive. So I didn't understand how he would promise one thing and deliver the other. However, as the weeks start turning into months and the months into years and things start becoming easier and clearer, I became very grateful that he didn't give me what I thought I deserved, because I realized that I deserve so much more. Yes. The good thing about it is that he placed within me the ability to forgive my ex for all the hurt and pain. We are friends. He has since had a child and 2 wives. And like a wayward brother, I still inquire of him from time to time. I think it is truly awesome to move past your pain and to be able to forgive those who have wronged you. I hold no grudge. As a matter of fact, I am grateful for the people who have contributed in shaping me into the phenomenal woman that I think I am. I don't know what's the nature of your rock bottom. And often there's no warning signs, and when you get there, there's no manual on how to get out. But in life, we have to be fighters. We have to fight. I didn't realize then, but looking back, rock bottom was my training ring. It was where I really learned to dig deep and fight and punch back. So, in closing, when the next time life hits you with an unexpected blow, I want you to remember that you have options. Don't panic. Take some time to process what has happened, but don't panic, because if you panic, you may end up doing things that you would regret. Assess your options. When nothing in your life seems to be going right, we convince ourselves that it's all out of our control and there's nothing that we can do. The minute we believe that there's nothing we can do is the instant that you lose your power. So no matter how bad your situation, always remember that you have options. Explore your options and write them down. It enables you to take back your power and to be optimistic. Regain your control. Dr. Greg Winch, a psychologist and author of The Squeaky Wheel, says that regaining as much control over your situation as possible is necessary, as it can help you to avoid feeling helpless and hopeless. So start looking at what actions you can take to help you overcome whatever obstacles you have in your way. Connect with people. Whether it's crying to family members or seeking advice from a professional or going out with friends, connect with people. It is very tempting to isolate yourself when you are at rock bottom, but don't stay there for too long. You need people, you need family, you need friends, mentors, professionals, spiritual advisors, people that you can identify with to help you find your way. Let yourself be vulnerable. It's okay. Appreciate the good. Whether it's your faith, your family, your health, your education, whatever it is, when you are at rock bottom, there's always things in your life that would make your life worse if you didn't have them. So you need to recognize those things and appreciate them. Stay in the present. Try not to go reliving all the pain and the hurt. Don't dwell there. Because if you dwell there, you're going to stay there. Stay in the present. And always remember that there is somebody